My coworker scheduled an important client presentation on my birthday, then accidentally deleted all my files an hour before. As I frantically recreated everything, he strolled in with our boss and said, "See? Told you she'd be scrambling like a desperate intern." They both laughed. We'd been colleagues for 4 years, and I'd covered his projects during his month-long family emergency that I later discovered was actually a vacation in Bali with his girlfriend, who happened to be a representative from our biggest competitor. I smiled, asked for 15 more minutes, and delivered a flawless presentation. This morning, my email shows 34 urgent messages from him. His access card doesn't work, and his desk has been cleared out by HR. The kicker? He's currently being investigated for expense fraud with his company credit card, corporate espionage, and violation of his non-compete agreement. His girlfriend's company has dropped him like a hot potato. His car was just repossessed from the office parking lot, and I've been promoted to his position with a corner office and a 40% salary increase. Sometimes karma needs a little help. Tyler and I met during the company merger 4 years ago, when the company I worked for was absorbed by a much larger one. I'd built a solid reputation at my job over 7 years, working my way up from entry-level analyst to senior consultant through sheer determination and consistent results. The merger was already stressful, rumors of layoffs, competing corporate cultures, and the uncertainty of new management, but nothing prepared me for Tyler. Our departments were combined, forcing us to collaborate on overlapping accounts in the cutthroat world of corporate consulting. From the beginning, there was something off about him. A perfectly practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes, designer suits that seemed a bit too expensive for his position, and the way he'd subtly undermine colleagues in meetings while maintaining plausible deniability. He was the kind of person who would criticize your idea, then repackage it as his own 20 minutes later to enthusiastic approval. Tyler had this remarkable ability to take credit for group successes while distancing himself from failures. He could spin any situation to his advantage, transforming his mistakes into other people's oversights, with such skill that you'd almost believe it yourself. At first, I admired his political savvy. Corporate America rewards that kind of maneuvering, right? I even found myself taking notes on his techniques during my first few months. His confidence was mesmerizing to everyone around him. Clients loved his smooth presentations, colleagues envied his apparent effortlessness, and management saw him as a rising star. You can learn a lot from Tyler. My new manager, Jessica, told me during my first performance review post-merger. He has executive presence. What exactly was executive presence? Apparently, it meant style over substance and connections over competence. The red flags started appearing within months, small at first, but impossible to ignore over time. During our first major client pitch, a $3.2 million account, Tyler accidentally left my name off the presentation team, despite my development of 60% of the materials. When questioned by Jessica, he claimed it was a simple oversight and that I was still learning the industry. I had 5 years more experience than him and had previously managed similar accounts before the merger. Rebecca's approach is a bit old school, he told Jessica within my earshot, solid but not exactly innovative. I'm trying to mentor her. I was 38, Tyler was 34, hardly a generation gap, but he spoke about me as if I were a relic from another era. Another time, he forwarded a confidential salary spreadsheet to the entire department, which coincidentally showed my compensation as higher than his and several other pre-merger originals from the company he worked for. The resulting awkwardness with colleagues lasted months, with several team members questioning why the new girl was earning more than established employees. The spreadsheet showed me earning $98,500, while Tyler was supposedly making $87,300. No hard feelings, he told me, hand on my shoulder. You must have been a real superstar at your old company. I later discovered through an IT friend that he had modified the spreadsheet before sending it, inflating my salary by nearly 20% above what I actually earned. In reality, he was making $12,000 more than me, despite my additional years of experience. By the time this came to light, the damage to my relationships with colleagues had already been done. During client calls, he developed a habit of saying, "We should probably get Rebecca's thoughts on this, though she tends to overthink these issues," or "Rebecca has a more conservative approach, but I think we need to be bolder here." Always with that same perfect smile that clients interpreted as collegial respect, but I recognized as calculated undermining. He had a talent for making these comments when senior leadership wasn't in the room, but colleagues and clients were present to absorb the subtle message. Rebecca is competent but outdated, cautious to a fault, not someone who will drive innovation. Our manager, Jessica, seemed oblivious to Tyler's tactics, or worse, encouraged them. She and Tyler shared the same alma mater, which they mentioned at least once in every meeting. Both belonged to the Downtown Yacht Club, and often grabbed drinks after work. I once overheard them laughing about the pre-merger company people and how we were too process-oriented and needed to learn to play the game. Jessica was in her mid-40s, divorced, and clearly enjoyed the attention from Tyler, who flirted just enough to be flattering without crossing obvious lines. Meanwhile, I stayed late fixing the messes they left behind while they networked over martinis, methodically documenting everything as a matter of self-preservation. My office drawer slowly filled with folders, missing client deliverables, timeline discrepancies, expense report issues, credit allocation. I wasn't planning revenge, I was simply trying to protect myself from being blamed for their increasingly frequent mistakes. Despite the challenges, I built a solid reputation with our clients. My portfolio grew, and I secured several high-value accounts that boosted our department's numbers significantly. This one account alone, a notoriously difficult client who had gone through 3 account managers before me, increased their contract value by 40% under my management. Their CEO, David, specifically requested me for all financial discussions, saying, "Rebecca is the only one who comes prepared with numbers that actually add up." Tyler's response? He began excluding me from client meetings for efficiency and then misrepresenting my strategies as his own innovations. The streamlined approach Rebecca implemented was promising, but I've enhanced it with a more dynamic framework, he would tell clients, after literally renaming my process documents and adding his logo. Clients who emailed me directly would mysteriously find Tyler added to all subsequent communication chains. Several times, I arrived at client locations to find meetings had been rescheduled without my knowledge, only to learn later that Tyler had conducted them without me. My direct reports were slowly reassigned to other projects or to Tyler directly. My budget for client entertainment was cut while Tyler's expanded. My office, which had a window when I first joined the company, was switched to an interior one during space optimization, while Tyler moved into a corner office with 2 windows. It was death by 1,000 cuts, none of which individually seemed worth fighting over, but collectively formed a clear pattern of systematic undermining. Last year, Tyler had a family emergency that required him to work remotely for a month. His grandmother was critically ill, he told everyone, and he needed to be with family while still maintaining some work responsibilities. I covered all his accounts without hesitation. Who wouldn't in such circumstances? I managed his client calls, handled escalations, and even finished a major proposal that he'd barely started, working until 3 a.m. 3 nights in a row to meet the deadline. When he returned, he was suspiciously tanned and had Instagram photos that he quickly deleted, showing him at a luxury resort in Bali. Not exactly the hospital bedside vigil for his critically ill grandmother he described to everyone. A mutual connection in finance later let slip that Tyler had submitted expense reports during this time for client dinners in the city, when he was supposedly across the country with his dying grandmother. More disturbing were the photos that showed Tyler with a woman I recognized, Diane, who worked for our biggest competitor. They appeared quite intimate in several shots. A quick LinkedIn check confirmed she was a senior business development manager at the competitor's company, exactly the kind of position that would benefit from insider information about our clients and pricing strategies. I added these discrepancies to my growing documentation folder, now stored securely in my personal cloud storage rather than company servers. I wasn't sure what I would do with this information, but something told me to keep it safe. My personal life suffered through all of this. My marriage had dissolved the previous year, partly due to the constant overtime and stress from work. My ex-husband Mark had grown tired of competing with urgent client emergencies and Tyler's messes that somehow became my responsibility to fix. "You're never really here, Rebecca," he said during one of our last conversations. "Even when you're physically present, you're thinking about work, worrying about what Tyler might be doing, checking your phone for emails from Jessica." He wasn't wrong. I'd become obsessed with keeping my head above water professionally, and our relationship had drowned in the process. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago, adding another layer of stress to an already difficult year. My friends had stopped inviting me to events since I canceled so often for work emergencies. I'd missed my niece's baptism, my sister's graduation, and countless other moments that can never be recaptured. All while Tyler was building his reputation on my sacrifices. My health was suffering too. I'd developed insomnia, grinding my teeth so badly at night that my dentist recommended a mouth guard. I'd gained 15 pounds from stress eating and lack of time to exercise. The woman looking back at me from the mirror each morning had dark circles under her eyes and a perpetual worry line between her brows that hadn't been there before the merger. My birthday fell on the same day as our quarterly presentation to our biggest client, a wealthy corporation whose business was crucial to our firm. Tyler had volunteered to handle the scheduling, assuring me he'd arrange it for the following day so I could take my birthday off. I'd mentioned plans to meet friends for a special dinner at Maison Azur, my first real celebration since my divorce finalized 6 months earlier. After years of putting work first, I was finally prioritizing my personal life, even if just for one evening. I'd even bought a new dress for the occasion, midnight blue with silver accents, far more elegant than my usual work attire. My friend Emma had arranged for a small celebration with our close circle, including a cake from my favorite bakery across town that required ordering 2 weeks in advance. That morning, I received a panicked call from Jessica at 8:17 a.m. "Where are you? The presentation starts in 2 hours." Her voice was shrill with panic. I sat up in bed, still half asleep and confused. "What?" That's scheduled for tomorrow. Tyler confirmed it last week. Well, the client is expecting us at 11:30 today, and they've flown in their entire executive team. Richard is already here from New York. Richard was our VP of sales, who only appeared for the most critical presentations. There must be some mistake, I insisted, already getting out of bed and looking around frantically for something to wear. I have the email from Tyler confirming tomorrow's date. Well, someone screwed up and it wasn't me, Jessica snapped. Just get here, now. I rushed to the office, adrenaline pumping, still in my casual clothes, dark jeans and a blouse instead of my usual presentation suit. My hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, rather than the polished style I normally wore for client meetings. I hadn't even had time for breakfast, grabbing only a coffee from the shop downstairs before rushing to the elevator. When I arrived, Tyler was calmly sipping coffee at his desk, scrolling through his phone. He looked up with perfectly feigned surprise. Oh, did I forget to tell you? The client could only do today. I sent an email last night. His concern seemed so genuine that for a moment, I doubted myself. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal gray Armani that I knew cost more than my monthly rent. I didn't get any email, I said, already logging into my computer. I was up until midnight working on a proposal. I would have seen it. That's strange. Maybe check your spam folder. Technology, am I right? He gave a small, sympathetic smile. Anyway, good thing you're here now. Richard's not happy about the confusion. No such email existed. I checked repeatedly, even asking IT to verify later. Nothing had been sent. When I mentioned this to Tyler later, he suggested that maybe it was a system glitch with an expression of such sincere concern that anyone else would have believed him. I logged into my computer to find my entire presentation folder empty. The backup on our shared drive was also missing. Even more alarming, the local copy I always kept on my encrypted USB drive wouldn't open, somehow corrupted overnight. System logs would later show Tyler accessed both network locations at 6:30 a.m., nearly 3 hours before the office typically opened. 4 months of work, market analysis, and client-specific strategies, all gone. As I frantically tried to recreate months of work, I overheard Tyler in Jessica's office through the thin wall between our spaces. She's always disorganized. Remember the other account? Same thing. I've been covering for her for months, but with Richard here, his voice trailed off into a concerned whisper. Jessica's response made my blood run cold. I know. I've been documenting the issues, but HR needs more before we can take action. Maybe this will be the final straw. It's just frustrating, you know? Working so hard to build client relationships and then watching her drop the ball. Did you see what she's wearing today? Jeans to our big presentation. It's unprofessional. Keep this between us, but I'm meeting with Richard tomorrow to discuss reorganizing the team. This might accelerate things. They were building a case against me. While I'd been documenting Tyler's behavior for self-protection, they'd been constructing a narrative to push me out. With 45 minutes until the client arrived, I was running on pure adrenaline, rebuilding slides from memory and scraping data from old emails. My hands were shaking so badly I kept making typos. I hadn't even had coffee or breakfast. Tyler periodically walked by my desk, offering unhelpful suggestions and reminding me how important this client was to the team. Each time, he'd leave with a concerned sigh, just loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. If you need me to take over, just say the word, he offered, his voice dripping with fake compassion. No one would blame you, given the circumstances. The way he emphasized circumstances made it clear he was referring to my supposedly disorganized work habits, not the files he deleted. I've prepared a backup presentation, he added in a stage whisper that several colleagues could clearly hear. Not as detailed as yours would have been, of course, but it will do in a pinch. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, squeezing slightly too hard. We're a team after all. I shrugged his hand off without looking up from my screen. I've got this, Tyler. He lingered a moment too long. Well, I'll be nearby if you need saving. The word choice was deliberate, not help, but saving, as if I were drowning and he was the lifeguard. At exactly 11:15, as I was finalizing the last slides, Tyler walked in with Jessica and our VP of sales, Richard, who had flown in specifically for this meeting. Richard was known for his no-nonsense approach and had the CEO's ear. A bad impression with him would mean career suicide. Richard looked annoyed, checking his watch. Are we ready? The client's been in the lobby for 10 minutes. See, told you she'd be scrambling like a desperate intern. Tyler chuckled, gesturing at my cluttered desk and disheveled appearance. Jessica joined in with a small laugh of her own. Some people just can't handle pressure, Tyler added, placing his hand on Richard's shoulder like they were old friends. Jessica nodded sympathetically. Maybe we should let Tyler take the lead today. He's been working closely with me on a contingency presentation just in case. Of course he had. They had planned for my failure, or rather, engineered it. Tyler pulled out a USB drive from his pocket. I have everything ready to go. Same key points, just a different structure. Richard looked concerned but checked his watch again. We don't have time for drama. The client's in the lobby and they've brought their CEO. Apparently they're considering consolidating all their consulting services with one firm. The implication was clear. This presentation could either secure all of the company's business or lose it entirely. Their CEO, Nathan himself, is here? I asked, Surprised? The founder rarely attended regular presentations. Tyler smiled smugly. Didn't I mention that? He specifically requested to be involved today. I remember my hands freezing over my keyboard. 4 years of late nights, sacrificed weekends, and missed family events, all while being undermined at every turn. And now, on my birthday, they were witnessing exactly what Tyler wanted them to see: a frazzled woman who couldn't handle her job. Our biggest client, the account that made up 40% of our department's revenue, was minutes away. The client I had personally brought in and nurtured for 3 years, turning around their initially skeptical outlook on our services. I looked up at the three of them, Tyler smirking, Jessica checking her phone, Richard impatiently shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Something inside me hardened. I would not go down like this. I need 15 minutes, I said quietly. Tyler laughed. We don't have 15. 15 minutes, I repeated, looking directly at Richard. Then I'll deliver the best presentation this client has ever seen. And Richard, you might want to ask Tyler where the original files went. The system logs should be interesting reading. That got Richard's attention. Tyler's smirk faltered slightly. What do you mean? Richard asked, eyes narrowing. I keep backups of everything, I said calmly, holding Tyler's gaze. And our IT department keeps logs of who accesses what, when. 15 minutes is all I'm asking. Tyler's face paled slightly. She's trying to deflect blame. 15 minutes, Richard decided, cutting him off. Conference room A. He glanced at Tyler. Both of you be ready. Then he turned to me. And Rebecca, I'll be asking IT about those system logs regardless of how this presentation goes. Tyler lingered after Richard and Jessica left. What are you playing at? He hissed, leaning close to my desk. I continued typing, not looking up. Just doing my job, Tyler, like always. This won't end well for you, he warned, voice low enough that others couldn't hear. I finally met his eyes. Probably not, but at least I'll go down telling the truth. Something flickered in his expression. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear, before he composed himself and walked out. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who had put up with Tyler's manipulations for 4 years. She wasn't a victim. She was exhausted. Yes, underappreciated, definitely, but not powerless. My hands were still shaking, but no longer from panic. Now it was from a cold, clear anger that had been building for years. I thought about all the nights I'd gone home feeling smaller, doubting my own competence, despite years of proven success before Tyler entered my professional life. I thought about my failed marriage, my missed family events, the stress-induced health problems, all stemming from trying to succeed in a rigged game. 4 years of documentation was about to pay off. Every accidental email Tyler sent revealing confidential information, every client complaint about his mishandling of their accounts that was mysteriously removed from our ticketing system, every instance when my work appeared in his presentations with his name on it, every false expense report, every time he claimed to be in client meetings when he was actually at long lunches with Jessica, the photos of him with Diane, our competitor, when he was supposedly at his grandmother's bedside, every manipulative tactic I had witnessed and experienced. I had saved it all, initially as self-protection, then as a habit, and finally as insurance. My personal email contained folders of screenshots, forwarded messages, recorded meeting notes, and even a voice memo where Tyler had accidentally left a message meant for Jessica on my phone, discussing how they could transfer my largest client to his portfolio. I had been building this case meticulously, unsure if I would ever use it. I'm not confrontational by nature. My ex-husband had often cited my conflict avoidance as a source of frustration. But something breaks in you when you realize people are not just taking advantage of your work ethic, but actively plotting to destroy what you've built. I opened my phone and texted my friend Emma. Remember that folder I told you about? If I don't call you by 5 p.m., send it to Richard, VP of Sales. Emma had been telling me for years to stand up to Tyler. Today, I finally would. I also sent a quick email to Marcus in IT, a friendly colleague who had helped me recover corrupted files in the past. Need urgent access to this morning's system logs showing access to my network drive. Possible security issue. Richard Hall needs this as soon as possible. Marcus was a stickler for procedure, but moved quickly when executives were involved. I fixed my makeup, straightened my casual blouse, and took my hair down, quickly braiding it into something more professional than the hasty ponytail I'd arrived with. I looked more put together, though still underdressed. As I walked back to my desk, I passed Tyler's office. Through the glass wall, I could see him on the phone, gesturing animatedly, looking more stressed than his usual composed self. He glanced up, saw me watching, and immediately turned away. I grabbed my tablet, the recreated presentation, and a notebook. Then I took a deep breath and walked to conference room A, not as someone desperately saving her job, but as someone about to reclaim it. The presentation itself went flawlessly. I had rebuilt it from memory, yes, but it was actually better than the original, more concise, more targeted to the client's recent concerns. I incorporated feedback from my last 3 client meetings, information that Tyler wouldn't have had access to since he'd been excluded from those discussions at my request, the one boundary I had managed to establish. The CEO was more engaged than I'd ever seen him, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and ROI projections. I answered each one confidently, without referring to notes. This was my work, after all, and I knew it intimately despite the missing files. I I watched Tyler's smirk fade as the client repeatedly praised specific strategies I presented, strategies he had tried to take credit for in previous meetings. When Nathan asked a particularly challenging question about implementation timelines, Tyler jumped in with an answer that contradicted the data I'd just presented. Actually, I interrupted smoothly, as the slides show, we've already implemented this approach with 2 smaller clients as a pilot program. The results are on page 17, which demonstrates a 34% efficiency improvement in the first quarter alone. Tyler wasn't involved in those pilot programs, which might explain his different understanding. Nathan looked impressed. Tyler looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Richard was watching the dynamic with increasing interest. This is exactly why we value your team, Rebecca, Nathan said. You've consistently delivered results-focused strategies with real data behind them. The emphasis on my name wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jessica attempted to redirect the conversation. Tyler has also been working on some innovative approaches for your Western Division. Has he? Nathan responded coolly. We haven't seen those yet, and we just met with the Western Division leadership yesterday. An awkward silence fell over the room. Tyler cleared his throat. Those are still in development. I wanted to perfect them before presentation. Nathan nodded non-committally before turning back to me. Rebecca, can you walk us through the implementation timeline again? I want my CFO to understand exactly how this rolls out. But the presentation was just the beginning. After the meeting, as everyone was shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, I noticed Richard pulling Nathan aside for a private word. Tyler was hovering nearby, clearly trying to insert himself into their conversation, but Nathan's body language was closed off to him. I gathered my materials, ignoring Tyler's attempts to catch my eye. As I was leaving, Richard caught up with me in the hallway. That was illuminating, he said carefully. Can I see you in my office in 20 minutes? I nodded, feeling strangely calm despite the enormity of what was happening. I'll be there. I stopped by my desk to find an email from Marcus in IT. Logs pulled as requested. Interesting activity at 6:27 a.m. from Tyler's credentials. Perfect timing. I also had 3 missed calls from Emma and a text. Do I need to send the folder? I quickly responded, not yet. We'll call soon. I had prepared this conversation for months, rehearsing it during my commute and in the shower, refining exactly what I would say. Now that the moment was here, I felt oddly detached, as if watching myself in a play where I already knew the ending. At exactly the appointed time, I knocked on Richard's door. Come in, Rebecca, he called. I entered to find him reviewing something on his computer, brow furrowed. He looked up as I took a seat. I just received some interesting logs from IT, he said without preamble. Care to explain why Tyler was accessing your files at 6:30 this morning? I can't explain his actions, I replied calmly, but I can show you that this isn't an isolated incident. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. I need to show you something that affects the company's integrity and client relationships. I showed him my documentation, not all of it, just enough. Tyler's family emergency Instagram posts alongside his leave request form, his original expense reports next to credit card statements showing different amounts, emails where he took credit for my work alongside time-stamped drafts in my account, the system logs from this morning showing him accessing and deleting my presentation files. Then I showed him something that made his eyebrows shoot up, evidence that Tyler had been quietly approaching our clients about following him to a competitor, using pricing information he shouldn't have had access to. Where did you get this? Richard asked, his voice deadly quiet. Tyler accidentally copied me on an email chain he meant for someone else. Once I saw what was happening, I started paying more attention. I pulled up more documents. He's been setting himself up to take our 3 largest clients to our competitor, where they've offered him a director position. I then showed him the photos from Bali, Tyler with Diane, clearly in a romantic relationship. This was taken during his supposed family emergency last year. Richard's face had gone from concerned to stone cold. There's more, I said quietly. Jessica has been covering for him, possibly because of their personal relationship, possibly because he's promised her something with the competitor as well. I showed him text messages Tyler had accidentally sent to my phone that were clearly meant for Jessica, discussing their exit strategy. I didn't present it emotionally or as a victim. I presented it as a professional concerned about company integrity and client relationships. I'm not asking you to fire him, I said, which was true. I didn't need to ask. I'm asking for a fair assessment of what's been happening in our department, and I'm requesting to be reassigned to a different manager. Jessica and Tyler are too close for her to evaluate either of us objectively. Richard was silent for a long moment, then he asked the question I was prepared for. Why didn't you bring this up sooner? Because today he made it affect our clients, I answered. Until now it was just affecting me, and honestly, I was hoping it would improve without escalation. We're supposed to be on the same team. Richard nodded slowly. I'll need copies of everything you've shown me. I've already prepared a secure file, and there's more I can provide if necessary. As I stood to leave, Richard said something unexpected. For what it's worth, Rebecca, I've heard about your work from the clients themselves. They specifically mention you, not the department, not Tyler. That's rare. Nathan just told me that if you ever decided to leave, he'd consider moving their business wherever you went. Do you know how unusual that is? It was the first time in years I'd received direct positive feedback from leadership. It took everything in me not to tear up on the spot. Thank you for telling me that, I said simply. Take the rest of the day off, Richard said. It's your birthday, isn't it? Go celebrate. I'll handle things from here. I didn't argue. As I packed up my desk, Tyler approached, his expression a mixture of anger and fear. What did you say to Richard? He demanded in a low voice. Nothing that isn't true, I replied, continuing to gather my things. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed. This isn't over. I finally looked up at him, feeling nothing but a strange sort of pity. Actually, Tyler, I think it is. I didn't sleep that night, alternating between worrying I'd gone too far and wishing I'd done it sooner. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's smug face as he announced to everyone that I was scrambling like an intern. I replayed years of subtle undermining, of ideas stolen, of credit redirected. My phone buzzed several times with texts from Tyler, first angry, then cajoling, then threatening legal action for defamation. I didn't respond to any of them. I did, however, forward them to Richard with a simple note. FYI, receiving these messages from Tyler. Richard responded within minutes despite the late hour. Do not engage, all being handled. See you tomorrow afternoon, not morning. The clear instruction to come in late was a gift. I finally took a sleeping pill and managed a few hours of restless sleep. The next morning, still my birthday, though the dinner with friends had been canceled, I slept until 9 a.m., something I hadn't done on a workday in years. I took my time getting ready, even stopping for a proper breakfast at a cafe near my apartment. I felt strangely light, as if a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. I arrived at the office at 11:30 to find the place buzzing with barely concealed excitement, the kind that only comes from major workplace drama. Heads turned as I walked to my desk, conversations paused and resumed in hurried whispers. Richard and the head of HR, Melissa, were in Jessica's office. Through the glass walls, I could see Jessica's face was pale, and she was shaking her head repeatedly, gesturing with increasing agitation. I wasn't invited to that meeting. I didn't need to be. Sarah from the front desk stopped by my work area. She let me know that there was a delivery for me and placed a small gift bag on my desk. Inside was a cupcake with a single candle and a card signed by the admin team wishing me a happy birthday. It was such a small, normal thing, but it nearly broke me. When was the last time anyone at work had acknowledged my birthday? Tyler arrived at 12:15, much later than usual, looking smug until he saw Melissa exit Jessica's office. His face changed as she asked him to bring his laptop to the conference room. He glanced at me as he walked past, a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension in his eyes. At 1:30, an IT security specialist began examining Tyler's computer at his desk. Two more IT staff were reviewing server logs and email archives at Jessica's workstation. People were starting to whisper more openly now, theories spreading throughout the office. People were whispering stuff like how they heard he was stealing clients, or that there was expense fraud going on, or that Jessica was somehow involved. Samantha from accounting showed up, asking to speak with Richard about discrepancies in expense reporting. She had this thick folder I recognized as containing the department's credit card statements. Richard met her in the small conference room, and they looked super serious as they spread documents across the table. At 2:45, I got an unexpected visitor, Nathan himself, accompanied by Richard. Nathan greeted me warmly and extended his hand, personally thanking me for yesterday's presentation and calling it exceptional work under difficult circumstances. I stood to shake his hand, totally surprised by his presence. I thanked him, and he mentioned he was hoping I might be free for coffee next week, because there were some new initiatives he wanted to discuss with me directly. I glanced at Richard, who gave me an encouraging nod. I told Nathan I'd be happy to meet. After he left, Richard hung around my desk and quietly told me that Nathan doesn't normally meet individual consultants for coffee, so I should take it as the compliment it was meant to be. At 3:15, Tyler was escorted to the elevator carrying a small box of personal items. His face was ghostly, and he wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Security stood nearby, not touching him but clearly there, to make sure he left without causing a scene. As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of his face. His usual confident mask was completely gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. At 4 o'clock, Richard called an emergency department meeting. He didn't go into specifics, but announced that Tyler was no longer with the company, and that Jessica would be taking some time off while departmental structures were reassessed. Alicia from the Eastern Division would be temporarily overseeing our team. Richard also mentioned they'd discovered some discrepancies in client account management. He said some of us might be contacted by HR or legal in the coming days, and asked us to be candid and forthcoming with any information we had. He emphasized it wasn't about assigning blame, but ensuring we maintain our integrity with clients. The room was was dead silent, tense with all the questions nobody was asking. Finally, James from the junior team raised his hand and asked about the current projects, since Tyler had been managing several key accounts. Richard nodded and explained that all of Tyler's accounts would be temporarily reassigned. He said I would be taking over Nathan's company's portfolio effective immediately, with a brief glance in my direction. Other reassignments would be announced by the next morning. The meeting broke up with this weird energy I hadn't felt in our department for years, kind of a mixture of shock, relief, and cautious optimism. Several colleagues stopped by my desk afterward, either congratulating me on getting the Nathan's account or awkwardly admitting they'd noticed Tyler's behavior, but hadn't known what to do about it. Zara quietly confessed that he always made her rewrite her reports, and then he'd submit them as his own work. When she complained to Jessica about it, Jessica told her she should be flattered he thought her work was good enough to use. At 5:30, Jessica stopped by my desk with red eyes, not looking so confident now compared to yesterday when she'd laughed at my expense. She quietly asked where Nathan's documents would be filed, not quite meeting my eyes. I showed her exactly where everything was stored, including the backups Tyler had deleted, which I had quietly restored from my personal archive that morning. She asked if there was anything else she should know about the account before she left, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept my tone neutral and told her they prefer weekly updates instead of the bi-weekly schedule in the system, and that their CFO always wants to see the raw data behind any projections. She nodded, then hesitated before saying, "For what it's worth, I didn't know about the files, or the client solicitation, or our competitor." "What did you know about?" I asked quietly. She flinched slightly and admitted she knew he was taking credit for my work and manipulating the team against me. She finally met my eyes and said she let it happen because it was easier than admitting she'd made a mistake promoting him. She apologized to me. I just stared at her until she walked away. Whether she knew about those specific things or not, she had enabled Tyler for years. Her ignorance was willful at best. She flinched slightly. "I knew he was taking credit for your work. I knew he was manipulating the team against you." She finally met my eyes. "And I let it happen because it was easier than admitting I'd made a mistake promoting him." "I'm sorry, Rebecca." I just looked at her until she walked away. Whether she knew about those specific things or not, she had enabled Tyler for years. Her ignorance was willful at best. By 6 p.m., my email contained messages from 4 of Tyler's clients, all forwarded from his account by HR, all asking urgent questions that he had apparently been ignoring for weeks. Based on the timestamps, some had been sitting unanswered for over a month. At 7:15, as I was finally packing up to leave, Richard asked me to join him in his office. My heart raced. Despite everything, years of corporate conditioning made me fear I was somehow in trouble. Instead, he offered me a senior management position, overseeing the accounts Tyler had been mishandling, and with a 40% salary increase. "We need someone with your attention to detail and client focus," he said, "especially now. You're not concerned about the disruption in the department?" I asked cautiously. Richard leaned back in his chair. "Rebecca, we've lost 2 senior people in one day because they violated company policy, attempted to poach clients, falsified expenses, and actively sabotaged their colleague. The disruption already happened. I'm trying to rebuild with people I can trust." By 8:30, Jessica had been escorted out in much the same way as Tyler, though with notably more dignity. Her office blinds were drawn during the process, at least. As I was finally leaving for the night, I ran into Marcus from IT in the parking garage. "Quite a day," he said with a knowing smile. "Those system logs were just the tip of the iceberg, weren't they?" "What do you mean?" He leaned closer. "Security pulled all of Tyler's emails. Apparently, he's been feeding information to our competitor for months. Corporate espionage is the rumor going around IT, and those expense reports, he was double-dipping, submitting the same receipts to us and to clients for reimbursement." I felt a chill despite the garage's warmth. "That's worse than I thought." Marcus nodded. "Legal's involved now, and not just our legal team." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, everyone in IT always thought Tyler was a jerk. The way he'd call demanding immediate help for emergencies that weren't emergencies at all, then take credit for our fixes." As I finally got into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "What happened? You never called. Do I still need to send the folder?" I smiled and replied, "No need. Tell you everything over dinner. Still up for celebrating my birthday a day late?" "Are you kidding?" "Yes. Maison à jour at 9. I already called them and they're holding our reservation from yesterday." As I drove to the restaurant, I realized I was smiling. Really smiling. For the first time in months. It's been 6 weeks since what my friends now call the birthday betrayal. The changes have been significant but quiet. The company values discretion after all. Tyler was terminated for cause, expense fraud, corporate espionage, and breach of his non-compete agreement being the official reasons, though I suspect the full list was longer. The termination for cause meant no severance and a complicated unemployment claim. According to Melissa in HR, he's still contesting it, even threatening a wrongful termination lawsuit. The company's legal team apparently laughed when they received his lawyer's letter. 2 days after his termination, Tyler's car, a leased BMW M5 that was definitely significantly beyond his salary range, was repossessed from outside his apartment building. Rumor has it that the lease payments had been made with company funds through an elaborate scheme of falsified reimbursements. The company is also pursuing reimbursement of over $14,000 in fraudulent expenses, personal charges Tyler had disguised as client entertainment, and travel costs. His new position at our competitor mysteriously evaporated once they were informed of his actions by our legal department. Even more damaging, they are now conducting an internal investigation into Diane's role in the corporate espionage. Apparently, they're as unhappy about the situation as our firm is, recognizing that the potential legal and reputational ramifications far outweigh any short-term competitive advantage. Jessica wasn't fired outright, but was given the choice to resign or face an investigation into her management practices. She chose resignation with a minimal severance package that required her to sign an NDA about the circumstances. I've heard through the grapevine that she's moved to another state to work for a much smaller firm with a significant step down in responsibilities and compensation. The new department manager that was brought in from another branch has implemented a completely different project tracking system where all client communications are visible to the entire team. She's prioritized transparency and collaboration in a way that has transformed our department culture. Weekly team meetings now include recognition of specific contributions rather than vague departmental wins. My new corner office, yes, I got Tyler's old space, has become something of a safe haven for junior team members looking for mentorship. I've instituted an open-door policy that has led to some surprising innovations as people feel free to bring their ideas forward without fear of theft or ridicule. The Monarch account is now exclusively mine, along with 2 others that Tyler had managed. My workload has increased, but I've been authorized to build my own team. I've already promoted Zara to associate consultant, giving her the opportunity Tyler had repeatedly denied her. Most surprisingly, 5 junior team members have separately thanked me. Apparently, Tyler's behavior wasn't limited to undermining me. He had created an environment of fear and competition that had been suffocating innovation and collaboration. James admitted that Tyler had instructed him to deliberately exclude me from client emails to streamline communication, while Zara revealed that Tyler had taken credit for her market analysis in at least 2 major presentations. My coffee meeting with Nathan Reynolds turned into a 2-hour strategy session that culminated in him inviting me to present directly to their board of directors, an unprecedented opportunity that resulted in a 30% expansion of our contract. In his introduction to the board, Nathan specifically praised my integrity and dedication to excellence, words that meant more to me than any promotion or raise could. I've started mentoring 3 junior team members, something I wouldn't have had the confidence or position to do 6 weeks ago. Breaking the cycle of toxic competition feels almost as satisfying as seeing Tyler escorted out by security. As for Tyler himself, he's been remarkably persistent in trying to control the narrative. He updated his LinkedIn profile to claim he left the company to pursue new opportunities, only to have 3 former colleagues comment with thinly veiled references to the truth. He removed the comments and restricted his profile, but the damage was done. In our industry, word travels fast. I heard through industry connections that he's been interviewing with competitors but struggling to get offers. References matter in our field, and while the company won't give negative references, the lack of a positive one from a 4-year employer speaks volumes. Last week, I spotted him at a coffee shop near our office, looking significantly less polished than his former Armani-suited self. He was wearing wrinkled khakis and a dress shirt that had seen better days, his normally perfect hair showing signs of neglect. He was arguing with someone on the phone, gesturing wildly enough that he knocked over his coffee. Our eyes met briefly before he hurriedly gathered his things and left. Back to my reality. The client feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Nathan called Richard personally to express how pleased they were with the new direction of their account management, unaware of the drama behind the scenes. 2 other clients who had been considering leaving have renewed their contracts with expanded services. Jessica sent a text last week asking to meet for coffee to clear the air. I haven't responded yet. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Some people need to sit with the consequences of their actions without the comfort of forgiveness to ease their conscience. On a personal level, the changes have been just as significant. I finally had that birthday dinner, a month late, but with an even better reason to celebrate. I've reconnected with friends I'd neglected, scheduled a vacation for the first time in 3 years, and even started dating again, cautiously, but with more confidence than I've felt in a long time. My ex-husband Mark called after hearing about my promotion through mutual friends. He congratulated me and hinted at rekindling our relationship, mentioning that the main thing that came between us seems to be resolved now. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, Mark, I told him gently. Neither of us can go backwards. He seemed disappointed, but understood. Some chapters are better left closed, even if the ending wasn't what we originally hoped for. Perhaps most significantly, I've started taking care of myself again. Weekly therapy sessions have helped me process the gaslighting and manipulation I endured. I've resumed my old yoga practice, lost 7 of the stress-induced pounds, and finally got a proper night's sleep without grinding my teeth. Last month, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference about maintaining professional boundaries. As I prepared my presentation, I realized how much perspective I'd gained from the entire ordeal. Final edit. I don't regret my actions. I regret not taking them sooner. For years, I thought professionalism meant enduring quietly, working harder, and hoping merit would eventually be recognized. I thought documenting Tyler's behavior was just insurance I'd never need to use. I thought keeping my head down and focusing on clients would eventually lead to recognition. I was wrong. Real professionalism means standing up for yourself, maintaining boundaries, and ensuring that collaborative environments actually remain collaborative. It means recognizing when someone is systematically undermining not just your work, but the entire team's integrity. The company's quarterly results were announced yesterday. Our department's numbers are up 18% from the previous quarter, the first significant increase in over a year. The CEO sent a department-wide email congratulating the team, with a special mention of the renewed client engagement on the accounts I now manage. The email included an announcement about a new company-wide initiative focused on collaborative work practices and ethical client management, a direct response to the issues uncovered during the Tyler investigation. I printed that email and added it to my documentation folder, which I still maintain, though with far less urgency than before. Old habits die hard, after all, but some habits are worth keeping. Last week, Alicia asked me to speak to the entire division about effective client relationship management. As I stood at the podium, I caught a glimpse of Richard, nodding approvingly from the back of the room. 4 years ago, I would have been terrified. Now, I felt only a calm confidence. I began my presentation with a simple truth. The strongest client relationships are built on integrity, transparency, and consistent follow-through. The same could be said for all professional relationships, really. After the presentation, several colleagues from other departments approached me about possible collaborations. Doors that had previously been closed were suddenly opening. It wasn't just about Tyler being gone, it was about me finally being seen. Yesterday, I received an unexpected email from Nathan Reynolds asking if I would consider joining an advisory board he's forming for a charitable foundation focused on workplace ethics and leadership development. Your experience and perspective would be invaluable, he wrote. I accepted immediately. I've also received 2 unsolicited job offers from competing firms, ironically, including Maxwell Consulting, who are apparently cleaning house after the Tyler-Diane scandal. I've declined both, at least for now. There's still work to be done at my current company, and for the first time in years, I'm excited about the possibilities. So that's where things stand now. If there's a lesson in all this, it's one about the difference between patience and passivity. Patience is strategic. Passivity is surrender. Know which one you're practicing. Document everything, not out of paranoia, but out of professionalism. Build relationships with clients based on value, not politics. And remember that in most professional settings, your work will speak for itself. But sometimes, you need to make sure the right people are listening. And if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And if they call you a desperate intern, keep receipts and let HR handle the rest. That's not a joke. It's just good career advice. Watching the sunset through both windows, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching someone get what they deserve. It's finally getting what you deserve. And that's something worth waiting for, even if it takes 4 years and one very memorable birthday to achieve.